Okay. Hopefully we are live and streaming properly now. We will see if everything works. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the heart of the Little Pink Winery. Matt and I are really glad you're here. We're really sorry that you're not here in person. It really sucks. We were excited about this spring. It's such a cool time in the wine industry as we all, especially here in Walla, we all emerge from our cocoons and welcome everybody back to the valley and bring out all these new wines. And it's a time full of really a lot of excitement and anticipation. And it was our first chance to go through a whole spring cycle, and we wanted to see all our familiar faces back in the tasting room and a bunch of new faces as well. And unfortunately, it looks like we're not going to get that chance, at least for the time being. So we thought we'd try something new and just kind of invite you in this way and taste through the spring wines together. Well, not together. Throw the asterisk on there. Quick technical note, we're not really equipped to do professional level broadcasting yet. So we're doing this with a laptop built-in webcam and microphone, but we've done some beta testing and hopefully you're able to hear us and see us okay. You don't really need to see us that much. I mean, neither one of us is missing out on a modeling career. Second, we know that pretty much nobody has any of these wines in their hands yet. I mean, it would be awesome if we could be tasting through them together. Club shipments are going out, next week, so hopefully more folks will have these wines soon. But we're just so excited about them. We really wanted to get out there and forge some connections and reach out to you guys and really start talking and sharing the excitement that we got as Matt and I tasted through these wines for the first time together a few days ago, and to see where they were and to start writing our tasting notes. So all of these wines are live on the website now. I don't have all the content done yet in terms of descriptions, etc., but they can all be purchased on the website. Obviously, the club exclusive Cabernet Franc is only available to our wine club members, but feel free to log on and order.
And the Seven Hills Cab that we send everybody will have a label on
it. yeah, we're going through our shiners here in the tasting room. We had a slight label shortage on that line, and this is a perfectly good way to use up the shiners. So anyway, just to get started, I guess we'll jump straight into the Walla Valley Rosé. I'll try to maintain my distance from that. The 2019 Rosé was one of the interesting curveballs that came our way in the vintage last year with the early freeze. As you may remember, our rosé fruit in 2018 came from Breezy Slope Vineyard, which is one of the highest, if not the highest elevation vineyard in the Walla Valley. It's nestled up in the foothills of the Blue Mountains. And throughout the 2019 summer, it was really mild in the valley, and even more so the closer you got to the Blues. We had a lot of days where just kind of clouds kind of stacked up on the Blues, and so those vineyards all the way at the fringes, like Resurgent Vineyard, which you'll hear about later, and Breezy Slope, just were way behind the curve in terms of ripening. So when the forecast for a freeze in early October really started to firm up and we kind of knew what was coming, we headed up to Breezy Slope to sample that fruit, and to call it tart and underripe would have been a pretty significant understatement. I mean, it was lip-puckeringly sour. We knew that it was going to be a hard task to make some good rosé out of it. So we started looking into things like deacidifying, how to pull some acid out of the wine, even chaptalizing, adding a little sugar to bring up the ripeness a little bit. But it's not really our style to be that interventionist if we can avoid it. And as I mentioned, Resurgent Vineyard was also running way behind schedule, so our Syrah at Resurgent was still on the vine as well at this point. And we thought, well, we know some people are making some Syrah or some rosé out of that Syrah, and maybe we could try bringing that to the party. And so Matt went out and pulled a sample from the two vineyards, basically brought fruit back from both vineyards, and we put them together in a bag, kind of 50-50, crushed them up to see what the juice tasted like and to see what the chemistry was like when we put them together, and it looked pretty promising. And so a very rapid executive decision was made to pull a ton of that Resurgent Vineyard fruit as well and make a separate rosé out of that. So we pulled our normal Breezy Slope fruit, we pulled a ton of Resurgent fruit, we pressed them separately, we fermented them separately, and we aged them separately with an eye towards doing a blending trial to see how well they would play together. And as they went through, they kind of developed as we would expect. The Breezy Slope continued to be really tart and really underripe, and color was almost non-existent. The Resurgent was shockingly pink, almost Barbie pink. That started to mellow a little bit with time with the addition of SO2 and a little bit of aging. But boy, when we went and put them together, I mean, they just it looked like they were going to play together really, really well. And we were really enthused that basically everything from both lots just ended up going in together after doing our blending trials. And the result was this 2019 Walla Valley Rosé. It's about 55% Syrah from Resurgent, 45% fruit from Breezy Slope, which is a field blend as last year. I'd estimate that it's about 25% Coumoise and 20% Grenache. And it's just probably hard to see on the webcam, but it's a really, really beautiful peachy pink color, really vibrant and sparkly in the glass. And the nose, I think, when you really get into it, is just so vibrant, so much more lively than the 2018. I mean, it really jumps out of the glass. The 2018 was a little more subtle and a little more subdued and kind of a little calmer, and this is very in your face when you get that nose in the glass. And there's a ton of freshly sliced apple and a little strawberry, and then the deeper you get into it, you get this citrusy note. I'd say almost like a candied lemon peel. It just brings a really, really fun freshness to the wine. And then on the palate, I mean, the true story here is acidity. I mean, the acid is the tail of this wine from alpha to omega. I think of it as like there's just this ribbon that runs right through this wine from the very start when you first taste it to the very end of the finish. It's this central, just bright acidity that just is so lively on the palate, and it's so fresh and it's so energizing. But kind of riding along on that ribbon is this really smooth and lovely mouthfeel that comes from the lees stirring that we do throughout ferment and aging, just to resuspend the lees, especially during the 5 months in barrel. We also did put a little bit of the Resurgent Syrah Rosé juice into a neutral oak barrel, primarily because we were out of stainless steel barrels at that point. So this rosé does see a 20% neutral oak aging, and probably getting just a tiny little bit of creaminess from being in that barrel. I don't know, Matt, anything to add on this one?
No. I mean, I think you said it's really just about that laser focused acid that comes across in the palate. But then just that feeling of a little of this kind of little kind of soft texture and mouthfeel that is showcased as a result of that barrel stirring and maybe that neutral oak barrel that was used. And with that in mind, in that context, it'll be a kind of a fun transition into the Viognier. They're kind of the opposites when it comes to the palate texture and mouthfeel and the way that the wine is built on the palate.
Yeah, super excited about this wine. And I will say that we are having the unusual luxury that we're actually not spitting wine out for a change. I mean, we are constantly, as winemakers, spitting out pretty much everything we taste, but we figured nobody wants to sit here and watch us spit out wines or do all our normal tasting mechanics of slurping and sucking in all kinds of air. So we're streamlining it and making it a little more friendly for the viewer experience as well. So anyway, that's a quick summary of the 2019 Walla Valley Rosé, and we hope you guys are going to enjoy it as much as we do. I think it's a step up, significant step up from the 2018, which I already thought was pretty good. So we look forward to you having it in your hands and trying it for yourself.
All right, and from the rosé, we'll transition into the Viognier. These first two wines are really the two wines that have a pretty good and significant backstory to them. Part of that might be that they're the most fresh in our minds, given that we just made them this last fall. But the Viognier this year, kind of like the rosé, really threw us a curveball, but in the opposite manner of the rosé. The Viognier this year, we were out driving around, kind of going through our normal steps at the beginning of harvest, checking the early blocks that we know are going to be ready sooner than other blocks, just varying by location throughout the state. And one day we're cruising along out in central Washington, and Jay and I looked at each other in the car and was like, well, you know, we're kind of out this way. We should go pop up to Gamache Vineyard and check on the Viognier, knowing that, you know, we still had, at least at that point, given where we had picked it the year before, we knew we still had, you know, say three weeks at the earliest, maybe even 4 weeks until it was ready. And we pulled up to the vineyard, and we were still probably at least 100 yards away from the actual vines, and even from that distance, Jay's eyes kind of popped, and he said, "Oh man, I think we're in for it." You know, the fruit had clearly progressed much quicker than the year before. The skins of the Viognier, you know, while white grapes are actually green in color on the vine, and they kind of soften to this yellow when they ripen. A Viognier grape, when it ripens, softens to that kind of yellow hue, but then also kind of starts to get this almost browning or bronzing on the skin as it starts to ripen on the exterior. And the majority of the clusters were already showing this. And for us, you know, in our goal stylistically of making this kind of brighter, fresher style of Viognier and not wanting to get into that like viscous, oily, tropical end of the spectrum, you know, it was like, oh my gosh, we might have to move on this. So, you know, I mean, it's just goes to speak of what it means to us to have great relationships with our growers. You know, we immediately got on the phone with Lacey Liebeck, who manages the vineyard there for Sagemore, and said, hey, you know, we're on our way back to the winery, which is an 1.5 to 2 hour drive from that vineyard, and we're worried that this fruit's ready, and then we're going to want it picked really soon. How soon can you do it? And she said, hey, you know, we can go tomorrow morning if you're ready. So, you know, there on the phone, just from having seen the fruit in the vineyard, we said, yes, let's go on and get in the books for tomorrow morning and get that fruit off. And she went so far as to say, hey guys, you know what? We'll give you the bins. We'll loan you the bins to pick the fruit in, so that we didn't have to drive all the way back to the winery, get our bins, and then make the journey all the way back out to the vineyard, come home, and then do it again in the morning. So, you know, it was really meaningful for us to have Sagemore and Lacey help us out in that way. But so yeah, the Viognier that we made a month earlier almost than we did the year before. So kind of the opposite on the rosé. That rosé fruit just seemed to stay out for an eternity, and then our Viognier was so early compared to the year before. So now we'll get to trying enjoying some of this Viognier. So out of the gate this year, I would say that the color on the wine is just maybe a touch lighter than the previous year. It's just kind of maybe like a kind of a pale yellow, light yellow. The aromatics on this wine are still very much akin to what we made last year. You know, really kind of bright, vibrant floral aromatics, white flowers, you know, maybe kind of a little spicy quality, you know, like maybe some jasmine, and really great notes of you know, some Asian pear, man, it's really beautiful.
It really is so expressive today. These were opened yesterday, so they've had some time to breathe and become even more beautiful than yesterday.
Yeah, but really that great kind of floral component with some pear and maybe moving just a touch of stone fruit on the nose, but then also just a really nice kind of minerality to it. And yeah. But then you get on the palate, and that's where these two, between the rosé and the Viognier, are different. You get on the palate, and the Viognier is much more about this palate texture and weight. You know, where the rosé was really that kind of acid-driven palate with then a little bit of texture. This is all about the texture and that palate weight, but then that acid then comes through at the end to hold it together. so that it just doesn't get really muddied or anything. But on the palate again, just really strong on that kind of Asian pear profile, and that texture and palate weight that we do get out of this, while we still make it in a very kind of fresh, crisp, lean style, that palate weight and that texture can be attributed to the fact that we ferment it all in neutral oak barrels, and during ferment we stir those barrels every day. So the act of stirring the barrels during ferment and kicking up the yeast and the lees in the barrel just leads to this great kind of developing texture and mouthfeel that we get on the wine. So just again another really beautiful wine.
Yeah, I agree with Matt. It's really fun to see the way this opens with the acid, but quickly gives way to a little bit more generous mouthfeel. It doesn't cross the line into that unctuous, oily Viognier that you've heard us talk about before. It's much more just this smooth and really, really elegant palate weight. And then that minerality, I mean, that's the first thing that Matt picked up on yesterday in both smelling and tasting. There's just this flintiness to it. It's really, really cool, rocky texture that just kind of everything coalesces around that, and it just keeps it this very clean and fresh and kind of elevated experience.
And while while the color on it in glass is maybe a little bit lighter than last year's, the texture and the mouthfeel are just a little notch up. Across the board on both of these wines to start, it's just a really nice progression from 17 to 18. Still maintaining that consistency, but just little nuances that we feel are actually kind of improved from the initial wines that we made last year. So
yeah, agreed. Yeah. Really, really thrilled with both of these. So get your hands on them, taste them soon. All right, our first venture into the 2018 vintage is the Lake Colleen Vineyard Syrah. You've heard us rave about Lake Colleen. All of you Syrah files out there know what an awesome site Lake Colleen is. It's kind of the OG site for just cool classic Syrah in the Walla Valley, and probably one of the best in the state. So we continue to love working with the fruit. We love working again with the growers out there. Brad and Brooke do just a hell of a job at maintaining that vineyard, and we're thrilled with it. So in 2018, I was really a little uneasy about this wine for much of its life. I felt like the acid was almost maybe a little too much. We love our acid-driven wines, and we love the freshness and brightness it brings and how food-friendly it makes them. But persistently, even right up until bottling, I was just a little concerned that it just might be a little bit more than I would care to have. But boy, when we popped this bottle yesterday, all of my worries went right out the window, because it's in a great place. And remembering where the 2017 Lake Colleen was at this point last year, it was really, really coiled up and really, really wound up and uptight in the bottle for many months after bottling. I think it's still very coiled up, and it's still very young, and it will still benefit from a few more months in bottle for sure. But I just think it's showing so much expressiveness and so much character. Production-wise, from 17 to 18, those vintages weren't as different. We didn't get the curveballs that we got in 19 with the Rosé and the Viognier, so we're backing up a vintage. We didn't have that early freeze. Lake Colleen ripened up pretty nicely. I think maybe we picked it slightly earlier than 17, and it was a little bit hotter. I can't remember the exact date, maybe a week earlier, but pretty close. And the numbers were pretty similar. Pretty similar winemaking on this. Same yeasts, 95% Syrah, 5% Viognier co-ferment, 50% whole cluster. Same cooperage profile, neutral puncheon and barrel aging. The chemistry, the TA, 7.1 grams a liter, pH 375. So the pH is a little higher than I think, but that TA, I think, of 7.1 grams a liter really is spot on in showing that this has got a hefty backbone of some acid to it. The thing that's really noticeable to me is the depth of color in both the Syrahs. Matt will talk about this on the Resurgent, but both the Lake Colleen and the Resurgent, especially the Resurgent, which had room to go in the 17 in the color category, but Just so inky dark. I mean, the depth of color in the core of this wine is truly, truly deep. More than a few millimeters from the rim, and you can't see anything through the wine. It's just so dark and this beautiful, deep maroon color. Really, really excited by that. And boy, you put your nose in the glass and you immediately get just this brambly, juicy fruit, black and blue fruit. Just kind of jumps out at you first, but then it just really quickly, you start to get some of those savory notes, not so far as the rocks go, but what you kind of expect from Lake Helene. You get some of that herbaceousness, some of that dried herb, and you get some of that almost like a salami or a prosciutto, just this like little bit of meaty, smoky, salty brininess on the nose. It makes your mouth water before you even get a taste of it. So, hands down, I'm very confident that if you put this wine in front of me and I tasted it, I would be like, I'm pretty damn sure that's Lake Helene. I mean, it just is so beautifully typical of that vineyard, of really nice wines off that vineyard. So, Syrah off that vineyard in particular. So, give it a taste.
And I think that's the great thing about Lake Helene that we love, that you kind of started to touch on, is that the profile on the wine is not isolated to one end of the spectrum or the other. You get great fruit, you get great kind of herbal and savory qualities, and then you move more down the path of that savory quality to those really unctuous savory notes of meats and cured meats. And sometimes Syrahs can be just split. You've either got big jammy fruity or you've got really kind of savory herbal. And Lake Helene is just such a beautiful site because you get this marriage of all of them coming together and just showcasing so well and so intricately.
Totally agree. And boy, God, it's even better than it was yesterday. I mean, this would be one of my dad's wow wines on his scoring scale. That's the top of my dad's scoring scale. Is wow, that's a great wine. I think this is definitely in that realm. That acidity it's there. It's so bright, and it just brings this amazing energy and tension to the palate when you first taste it. And it just kind of leads into what I'm describing as a textural wonderland. I mean, the interplay of textures on this wine on the palate is really the star of the show. Right now, primary fruit notes on the palate are really subdued, but you get the acidity leads into this really quickly and noticeable tannin. I'd say there's more tannin present and visible in this than in our 2017. And that tannin starts to ramp up, and I got a little alarmed at first, but it just kind of hits this plateau and stops there. And then all around that, you're getting that briny minerality, you're getting the savory notes, you're getting all this cool complexity, you're getting some of that herbaceousness. And it's, it just is so much fun. And the finish just goes on, and you get a little bit salty and a little bit of sweet and a little bit of that acid. And it's, man, I'm really happy with this wine.
Yep. No complaints by any means.
Mm-hmm. We are excited. This is block 23 again, the same fruit we worked with in 2017. In 2019, we were able to also get some fruit in block 50 of Lake Helene, which is way up the hill in the south easterly corner. And I call it the Sideshow Bob block because it's a really strangely trained block of fruit. It's these really high cordons that are about 6.5 or 7 feet up, and then all the growth just sprawls out from there. And you have fruit everywhere from 2 feet off the ground to 8 feet off the ground. It's incredibly hard to sample from, but we pulled some of that this year in 2019 as well as block 23, and tasting the two side by side as they're aging. That block 50 is going to bring some really, really fun stuff to the party on our Lake Helene wines going forward. So anyway, that's a preview of the Lake Helene 2018 Lake Helene Syrah.
And so now we're moving on to the 2018 Resurgent Vineyard Syrah. I've already received one question that we'll touch on. Some people are aware, others might not be, that a month and a half ago, we had some pretty significant flooding issues in the area. getting feet upon feet of snow dumped in the blues makes for a killer day for Jay up at Bluewood skiing.
Yeah, definitely.
But to have a significant warming trend right after that and some rain spells disaster in the valley. Many people are familiar with the Rocks district of Milton Freewater. It's the new hot AVA in the area. The wines coming out of the Rocks are just really unctuous and savory, and predominantly Syrah is the prominent varietal out of that AVA. And this vineyard, Resurgent, sits on the South Fork of the Walla Walla River. So down in Oregon, outside of Milton Freewater, you've got the North Fork and the South Fork of the Walla Walla River. And where those two rivers converge and then make their way through Milton Freewater, that's where you find the Rocks district of Milton Freewater, that AVA. And it is solely defined by the extents of the soils that are associated with the previous or old riverbed of the Walla Walla River as it moved through Milton Freewater. So here we are up at its headwaters, and the South Fork of the Walla Walla River is one of the boundaries of the vineyard. It's right there. So unfortunately for them, flooding in the valley surely means flooding for them, and they actually saw some pretty significant damage. We were just out to lunch with Dr. Brack the other week to catch up, talk wine, and to talk with him about the status of his vineyard. That area nearest the river is or was planted to a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon. He told us he lost at least 3 acres of cab there, and for a lot of it wasn't just it's lost a little bit, like it was completely lost. Infrastructure and everything ripped up and swept away. That doesn't speak to the amount of vineyard remaining that he has where the vine rows were just folded over. The damage was pretty significant for him. There was water in their basement. He said there was several feet of water in their shop. It was a major thing. Now, for us directly as a winery, our Syrah block was actually clear of any of that flooding and damage issues. So as far as we know, everything is okay and going to move forward as we would typically expect for any year. We have been sourcing some Cabernet Franc from that vineyard. This fall, you'll see the initial release of that Cabernet Franc from the vineyard. And I think his block of Cab Franc there is about 1.25 acres, give or take. And he told us that he completely lost again, about 1/4 acre of that vine planting that he had put in. And those vines had only been in for 4 years. Where some of that cab in the back had been planted since '98. So there was some pretty good quality old vine cab that was unfortunately lost due to the flooding. All in all, we're pretty confident that things are safe and promising for getting a decent crop off of our Syrah and still probably the Cab Franc again this year. So back to the wine itself, the 2018 Resurgent Vineyard Syrah. The first thing of note, and you should be able to tell pretty clearly from any distance on a camera, compared to 17, there's just such intense color and depth to the wine. 17 was, like to say, kind of Syrah masquerading as Pinot Noir. Just kind of, I don't know. We still scratch our heads as to why it ended up this way. But it was this Syrah that was so velvety and luscious on the palate, yet so delicate and transparent and light in the glass. And there's things to be said for that. There's a lot of times where I find that appealing. However, it wasn't like that was our end goal. That's just where we ended up. But then to jump to this wine and to just again, see just that pure depth of color. You know, I mean, it's kind of mind blowing. But it is worth mentioning that in 17 we pulled from an older block of Syrah from that vineyard that again had been planted in about 1998, where this block of Syrah that we pulled in 18 came from a new block that Dr. Brack had planted when he took over the vineyard. And it sits, thankfully for us, in a flood scenario in the highest part of the property. And right near the roadside that gives you access to the vineyard, and across the road from there is a hillside that's made up of a lot of basalt rock. And so this part of the vineyard sees a lot more of that eroded basalt in the vineyard from that hillside, you know, that originated from times before the roads were even in place there. So it's a block that we're really thrilled and excited about. You know, when we took that block of 98 and 17, the fruit from this block wasn't ready. And Jay and I looked at each other and was like, yeah, no, we want that block when it's ready. Like, there's no doubt. Like, we'll take this for now, but this is what we want. So this is the block that we will be moving forward with from here till, you know, whenever. Yeah, now let's give it a sniff and a little taste and see what we got going on. So those of you that are familiar with the Rocks and Milton Free Water, you might be hard pressed to think that that this is not a rocks wine, and it's not. However, the soil type and everything about what has defined the rocks as an AVA is found in this vineyard. We are still in the old riverbed of the Walla River. There are all the cobbles, all the stones. The soil type is nearly identical. The difference here, we're on the South Fork of the Walla River. We're in kind of a steep canyon. You've got the roadside and the river that bookend the other side of the vineyard, and then you go up 800 to 900 feet straight up the hillsides. So we like to tell people that it's like the rocks mixed with Mill Creek. So you've kind of got the rocks influence, but also with this mountain aspect where you got cool air drainage morning and night. Those steep hillsides actually shade the vineyard for significant parts of the day, so we, you know, our ripening there is delayed a little bit. But
it's 600 feet higher elevation than the Rocks district proper too,
Yep.
so you're getting that the cooler evenings in particular.
But I mean, so the characteristics, aromatics on the nose, it's just so savory. You know, where I said, you know, Syrahs can have this spectrum, and the great thing about Lake Helene is it shows many aspects of those spectrums. This one kind of just plants itself more firmly in that kind of savory, kind of meaty, sultry spectrum. Just great minerality. Again, those savory components, a little bit of herb, and then getting more into kind of that like cured meat into the spectrum. But like the 17, it still shows itself as Resurgent Vineyard because it's got this little thread of like orange zest and clove, a little bit of spice that comes through on it.
The thing I'm continually surprised by, so this wine, the fruit came in at pH, I don't remember exactly, the pH 3.75, 3.
The fruit came in at
maybe
like,
even lower
maybe
than
even 3.6. Like it came in real low.
But boy, this wine in barrel very quickly went right to pH 4.0. I would never in a million years guess that the wine in this glass is pH 4.0. It just shows a freshness and a brightness that does not sort of suggest that you have a wine that's that high a pH.
Yeah. And so with a wine of that pH, you know, the main giveaway or the character and what you find on this wine on the palate is just this really kind of silky, velvety texture and mouthfeel. We did ferment this 50% whole cluster, so there's a little bit of that kind of stem tannin and grip there that kind of try to help hold it all together. A lot of times with those high pH wines, you can just run too far down that spectrum, and it's just kind of fat and heavy on your palate. This shows that weight and that texture, but it still has some of that tannin and grip, and then even still just some of that acid, enough of the acid present in the wine to really just hold it all together. And in the end, just leave this kind of just beautiful expression of a vineyard site. Our favorite thing to do last year was to pour these two wines side by side for everybody as they came into the tasting room. We can't wait to do that again. In the meantime, if you want to geek out on it like we do, maybe you should try that at home as well. It's a really fun kind of comparison study on kind of the spectrums of Syrah and the various components and characteristics that you can get out of them.
Yeah, and in years to come, I'm very excited already, even though we have only 2 vintages in, to see what verticals from these 2 sites are going to look like, to taste through multiple vintages and see how they evolve and change and vary year to year. Is going to be really freaking cool.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. But again, just going to dump that.
I hate to.
The finish on this wine, just the texture on the mouth, and it's just so juicy. And the finish, it's mouth-watering. The finish just keeps going. Yeah, it's a beautiful wine. Absolutely thrilled.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Don't hesitate if you have any questions you want to throw at us about these wines or about anything else, about any of the fall wines, about vintage, about what the heck we're going to do for the 2020 vintage. I don't know that we can answer that question, but feel free to ask questions in the comments. I am keeping an eye on them, so if anything pops up, I know there's a bit of a lag between when we talk and when things come across, so I want to make sure we don't end up wrapping things up before we get a chance to answer questions people may have. All right, the next wine is our wine club exclusive wine that went out or is going out to our club members in the spring release. This is stepping back yet another year into our 2017 vintage. It's our inaugural vintage. And this is a Cabernet Franc from Quintessence Vineyard on Red Mountain. So this is 100% Quintessence Cab Franc, unblended. I believe it's about 20% new oak. So we had pulled a little bit out of one of our new oak barrels and the rest out of neutral oak. This was an interesting block. It was the very last block of fruit we signed up for in our inaugural vintage. We felt the need for a little more Cab Franc in our portfolio, and Marshall at Quintessence had this available. And we kind of took it thinking, it's Red Mountain, it's super hot, not a great spot for Cab Franc. It's at the very base of the hill. It was a 3rd leaf block at the time. There was some uneven vigor in the block that they were dealing with. But we're like, you know what? We're going to take this, and at the very least, we'll have some more blending options. And sure enough, it made a wine that very quickly we realized, hey, this is going to be a great blending tool. And it made an appearance in a number of our 2017 wines. A little splash in the Finial Cab Franc. A little bit went into the Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon that'll be coming out in the fall, this fall. And but it was just this big, kind of weighty mid-palate, smooth, velvety, really, displaying its warmer site characteristics. But it wasn't really that franky. It wasn't like I drank this and thought, oh, this is a great Cab Franc. And so we kind of thought, it's just gonna, it's great, it's good to have this. We'll blend it, we'll use it as a tool. It is what it is. And it's another example of wine as a living organism. After about 15 months in barrel, one day Matt and I are tasting through, and we get to this wine, and we're like, whoa, that's different than it was. And it was really starting to show some interesting character. And so we kind of, as we came to final blending and thinking about and planning for what wines are going to go to bottle, it really showed itself as a great candidate for a wine club wine. In part because it is a little outside of the norm of the rest of our lineup. I feel like so many of our wines, all of our 2017 lineup and the first 4 wines today, all share this clear vision of the style of wine we're trying to make, that restraint, that balance, the centrality of a good acid core, everything that brings that brightness and liveliness, makes things food friendly. And this one is probably just a little bit off of that path, just a little bit. So it's a fun one to put in the wine club and say, hey, look, here's something a little different. Here's a little block of fruit that we want to do for a year. And we're actually thinking about bringing it back into the portfolio at some point as a blending component, because we kind of missed it in doing the 2018 blending. But we'll see. We're going to add a different Cab Franc block for 2020. To keep playing with Cab Franc. Turns out we really make some really cool Cab Francs. We're going to keep exploring that thread a little bit. So anyway, It's got a little bit more bottle age in it. This was bottled last summer, so it's had a little more time to kind of settle into its life and behave. It's got this just deep crimson core. Again, tons of color. We're not having any trouble with color in this wine. And you put your nose in the glass, and boy, the fruit is just so abundantly prominent. I mean, red and black cherry and red plum, and it's just so kind of this rich, fruity smell to it. And then I also get this really cool, Franc, we always talk about the green notes in Cab Franc. And this one isn't that bell pepper that you get a lot of times, or jalapeno pepper of maybe an less ripe Cab Franc. And it's not quite of the dried herb we see in the Finney Hill Cab Franc that we released last fall. I get there's this fresh leafiness to it that's freshly mown grass or something like that. It's a really pleasing green leafy note that it doesn't cross the line into that underripe herbaceousness. It's really just a fun little fresh note that I'm really excited about. Let's give it a taste.
Cut grass is a pleasing aroma to you. Tells me that you never worked on a lawn crew as a kid.
Well, if my brother's watching, I'm just going to avoid that altogether because that'll lead to all kinds of hassle about who had to do what garden chores as a kid. I will admit to both my brothers, if they're watching, that no, I never had to pick up buckets of rocks like you guys did. So, I win. I win. I did detassel corn for like 4 days. So that's how you know I'm a kid from Indiana.
Until you felt better about that?
Until I realized I wanted a college education for a wide variety of reasons.
We digress.
Yes.
Back to the wine.
Back to the wine. Yeah, so this one is just smooth. I mean, it's a little like the Petit Verdot from last fall. It's just velvety, and it's got this broad, soft mid-palate. Tons of fruit, lots of red fruit. A little bit of that dried herb shows up on the palate more. The tannins here are very soft, very subdued. They build up just a little bit to this gentle, just kind of really lingering finish. I also get some really classic character to this. I can't remember exactly, 14 and a half. I can't find the ABV on here. I have my data sheet somewhere.
14.4 listed on the label.
14.4. 14.8 on our tech sheet. Okay, we gotta fix that. Lower TA on this, 5.4 grams a liter. So compared to that Lake Helene, it's that difference in the titratable acidity really shows through. You can really see that it's a little less prominent here. I think you do get a tiny little bit of a barrel note on this, not in an overwhelming I taste oak, but just kind of those interesting barrel notes that you want out of a new French barrel. And this is again 20% new, so it's subtle, but it's there. You get a little bit of that vanilla, a little bit of that spice box and cedar, especially on the palate. I get it more on the palate than the nose. The nose is this one is really about the fruit and that sort of green, grassy, leafy smell. But it's a really enjoyable wine. I think it's incredibly approachable right now. I think it's just an easy wine to sit and sip and enjoy. Yeah, it is it's a great exemplar of sight and the impact sight has on wine.
Yeah.
And that hot red mountain sight brings this kind of bigger, kind of fruitier, kind of more broader and more expressive and expansive and juicier kind of mouthwatering style.
Yeah. And I think what's great about what this showcases from that site and what it showcases about how we approach sites like this is that, a lot of times, even when you start to run down that spectrum of big and bright and ripe, the tannins can just get so overwhelming and so overbearing, and in the end, out of balance. And what I love about the profile on this wine, and generally across the board on all of our wines, is that the tannin profiles are never that aggressive, that gum ripping. They're more of that. I constantly find myself writing, and I wrote it a lot in the last few days. Dusty, chalky, almost like cocoa. So again, that dusty cocoa quality. And I don't know what it is. If it's a testament to our fermentation process or our approach to when we pick the fruit, as opposed to when other people choose to pick the fruit, and then the qualities that I find in their wines when we taste them. But it's a really great thing that I think we've, figured out, and I love the quality that it shows and that it brings to each of the wines. And I think this again is kind of just case in point of how well we've done that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm really thrilled with whatever it is we're doing. I suspect part of it is our generally cooler fermentation temperatures. Most of our ferments on our reds tend to not ever get more than mid 80s.
Mid 80s at the max.
Yeah, kind of at the max, and even that was pretty hot for us. So running things relatively clean, not doing a ton of extended maceration, getting stuff off of the skins and off the seeds, and into tank and then into barrel to finish up. So
yeah, I mean, you could argue that in the end, for us, there's no need to do that extended maceration. A lot of people that do extended maceration, they run their ferments like clockwork, and it's like, hey, boom, in the bin, out in 7 days, we're done. Where for us, with that lower temperature, our fermentation is more of a slow, gradual process in the end, and I think we generally run it at about 14 days on skins before we're pressing.
Yeah.
Some people, it's clockwork, it's 7. For us, we end up almost exactly on every bin. Like sometimes we're 13, sometimes we're 15, but all in all, we're almost always 14 days.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's other people that play with native ferments and extended macerations that go 21 up to 50, 60, and on up. But yeah, I mean, it's just speaks to the pick decisions and then the way that we ferment. And I mean, I think just the result is what we want, which is in the end balanced and elegant wines.
Yeah. I think we're interested in playing with some of those things, playing with some more native ferments, playing with some extended maceration when we have more control over our processes. I mean, right now, obviously, we ferment in a shared space. So anything we would do that would be quote unquote native would likely not be native. I mean, there's other folks fermenting in that space using commercial yeast. So we like to kind of control what we can control in the variables. And so we make very selective and careful decisions on yeast, for examples.
Yeah.
Doing some yeast trials in 2019, we did a lot more yeast trials. We had a couple ferments where we had 2 bins of fruit from the same pick, and we do yeast A and yeast B in the 2 bins, try and compare and contrast, and found we got some really, really cool results from that. So continuing to explore, continuing to learn, but happy to be true to our underlying style. It's been driving us.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the last.
Yeah, the next completely new wine. The last 2 wines are back to the inaugural release phase. So this is our Seven Hills Cabernet Sauvignon. Many people that know Washington wines and Walla Walla wines at that know Seven Hills Vineyard. It's one of the original vineyard plantings in the valley. It's a highly regarded, well-respected vineyard site. Again, for us, this vineyard just comes back to the point of how important it is for us to have great vineyard partners and to work with great vineyard managers. And so for us with this vineyard, it's Sadie. Sadie is incredible. Sadie is one of our favorite people to work with, and this was our gateway to Seven Hills. We started in 17 with a 1/3 of an acre block of Cabernet. All in all, we got a ton, maybe.
Right around a ton that first year, 0.97.
And we've got this cute little 1/3 of an acre block that was Carmenere vines. And then some time ago, they took the Carmenere vines and cut them off and grafted them to Cabernet Sauvignon. So this is Cabernet Sauvignon grown off of Carmenere rootstock on this tiny little terraced block. It's not more than 5 rows. And each row is maybe a quarter of the length of a typical row at Seven Hills. So it's just this very unique, almost kind of obscure block in the back end of the vineyard. And when Sadie approached us when we were starting, we'd reached out to her and she approached us with the idea of taking this block. Not that it was the only block that she offered, so we jumped on it. And each block, each site even within a vineyard, has its own story. And that story became more apparent to us in 2018 when we picked up another block of Cabernet from that vineyard. And we began to see that this block, for whatever reason, whatever leads to this expression, whether it's that Carmenere rootstock, whether it's its location in the vineyard, whether it's managed differently, this block just shows more outward and overt kind of intensity and qualities that might kind of be perceived as ripeness, and it is a little bit riper. We're going out of our wheelhouse on this one. This one I think is like at 15% alcohol. That was just a result of trying to ripen the really overt pyrazines out of the wines, that we didn't end up with this really grotesquely green and unpleasing wine. We were just waiting for that to drop out, and this is just where we naturally ended. But in the glass and on the palate, it doesn't present that way. And so that's the beautiful thing about this block, and we're going to continue to do this, is just, it is this otherwise more overtly ripe wine compared to what we typically make. However, it doesn't show that way in the glass, which is the really beautiful part. It doesn't show hot. The palate is going to be a little more rich, a little more full compared to what we, released in our Columbia Valley Cab in the fall. But it still kind of speaks to us in the winery and the styles of wine that we're trying to make. But it also speaks to the different AVAs and the different microclimates and the different qualities of wine that you can get from the state. The first thing on the wine is just the deep, dark intensity of color. And part of that, again, comes back to that notion of maybe just showing a little more of that ripe quality in the fruit. The aromas on the palate, on the nose, again, start to tend more towards those dark fruits, those blue fruits. Just hints and touches of a little bit of cedar, a little bit of spice box. That speaks just back to our general tend towards reining in that oak profile. We don't want it to be overwhelmed by oak, but we want the oak to be a nuance and a character, and it shows there with a little bit of cedar, a little bit of spice box.
In this case, the new oak proportion is slightly higher on this wine, being such a bigger, riper wine. I think we had about 44% new oak on this, but it carries it really, really well.
Yeah.
And the barrel is not overt at all.
Yeah, it wears it well.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But man, the palate, it's just all about texture and mouthfeel. It's got this weight, but still this purity to it. And again, chalky, dusty tannins. I've had a lot of Seven Hills cabs that are beautiful in their own right. But man, they creep up into your gums with the tannin profile. This is just kind of nice and again, chalky and dusty down the palate, down the tongue. While it might still be kind of a more ripe and richer expression of cab for what we typically make, it still comes back in the end to having these otherwise kind of classic and kind of more old world profile to the wine, which is really just a really nice thing to achieve. And in the end, this wine, I can't wait to see how it develops in 5-6 years in cellar, if not even longer.
Yeah, for sure. This thing is built to age really beautifully. It's such a great, like our Columbia Valley Cab, I said to a lot of people in the tasting room, it's just such a great expression of the varietal. I think this is both a great expression of the varietal and a great expression of this block at Seven Hills. It really tells a story that we've seen consistently now over 3 vintages, especially as Matt said when we added that other block of cab, the block 18 cab at Seven Hills, how different those 2 blocks are. And this one just brings that darkness, that depth, and that weight and that heft to it. But boy, it's just so unequivocally cab. So many of those classic cab aromatics, that that black currant and a little bit of leather and the spice box and cedar that you mentioned. And then the tannins are just, I mean, they're there and they're big and they're weighty. And we ran phenolic profiles on all the juices and the Cabernet juices that we had in 2017, and this was just off the charts, full of phenolics. So the color, we've talked about the color on all 4 of the reds now, but this one is, kind of trumps them all. It's just like insanely nuttily dark, and then just the tannins are it's so good. I'm at a loss for words.
So we drink.
John, I think you're spot on. I see your comment on here. Yeah, that pick decision, it's clear to us that that's the single most important decision we make in the winemaking process, is getting that fruit off the vine at the right moment. And that right moment is, for me, impossible to do formulaically. I mean, we have a sense of where we want a block to land numerically, in terms of pH and bricks and acidity, but it's got to taste right. And that this Quintessence Cab Franc is a great example. We pulled that off the vine maybe 3 weeks after we pulled the cab. That was,
yeah, if not even longer,
a quarter mile up the hill. So we pulled our Cabernet Sauvignon from Quintessence significantly earlier than this Franc, and we just kept going back to the Franc block, and it wasn't there. It's not there. It's not there. It's not there. And the sugars were getting up higher than we would want them to be, but it was just still so green and so not ready to go. And we really, really needed it to taste right. We can dial in a little bit of the chemistry. We try not to manipulate or provide any sort of false, but you want to get the numbers where you're going to make a wine that you want to make. We did that with the Quintessence. But time and time again, and that's why 2019, the vintage was awesome, having both of us full time, because we were able to have boots on the ground in the vineyards so much more frequently. I mean, pretty much every week one of us was out in the vineyard, pulling samples, tasting, and it saved our bacon a couple times, especially with that Viognier story that Matt shared. We were out and we're like, let's go stop by. And had we missed that pick date by a week, we would have had a totally different wine. We wouldn't have landed where we wanted to land.
Yeah, the end result would have been drastically different.
Yeah.
No. Pick dates are huge. I mean, as winemakers, you got to take a stance, whether you're interventionist or not. Whether you take issue with, some people want to run a wine really, really ripe and really high on sugars, and then water it back and add a bunch of acid and do all these things to say, oh, hey, look, and they'll never tell you that they did. I don't think we're in a spot where we would ever say, yeah, no, we never did that. But we're very cognizant and aware of where our fruit stands in the vineyard, and we're out there as regularly as we can be, and we're very timely about our picks. And so, I think in 18, we made one adjustment across every ferment.
Yeah, I mean, we did some small water backs, but we didn't do a lot of acid adds. We didn't do a lot of tweaking or dialing. We just got things off the vine really when we wanted them off the vine.
Yeah, and even if it was a water back, I mean, you're talking about a water back that was in the realm of like a couple of percent, of the total volume.
Yeah.
So I mean, we were just making tweaks. So we still. Generally try to take that hands-off, holistic, unabated approach. However, you got to deal with what you're dealt, and also just the flows of the process of getting through a harvest and the realities of that. And the reality is that, especially when you're not in your own space and you're sharing a space with somebody else, and you're juggling other people's schedules amongst your own schedule in a process that's already as crazy as harvest is.
Yeah.
You got to make some adjustments here and there, but again, extremely minimal and as light as possible.
Yeah.
So.
New question in from Mike Droge. Why did you want a Cab Franc in your lineup? we went into it knowing that we wanted blending components from the start. We knew we wanted some Merlot, some Cab Franc, some Cab. We knew we were going to be Cab heavy. I've always loved Cab, and this is on the Bordeaux side. Obviously, on the Rhone side, we had Syrah, and then we went looking for Mourvedre and Grenache, and we've now got the three big components of the Rhone in our lineup as well. But just having that toolkit, that blending toolkit, was really important to us. And I've always loved Cab Franc. Cab Franc is an older grape than Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet Franc is one of the parent grapes. Cabernet Sauvignon is a cross between Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc. So Cab is technically a more ancient grape. And I've had some amazing Cab Francs out of Bordeaux, or Cab Franc heavy wines out of Bordeaux, and just been blown away by them on several occasions. A lot of New World Cab Francs get too much of that. You hear us talk about pyrazines, isobutyl methoxypyrazine, IBMP, that brings that green bell pepper. And a lot of times that is really off-putting to me. I've never wanted to make a Cab Franc that was just showing that kind of character. But I like a little bit of that herbaceousness. I like a little bit of that green. And for us, it proved to be an emergent quality of our lineup. So the Finial Frog that we released in last fall, when we first went through the blending trials, we knew we wanted to represent Finial Vineyard. We wanted a red wine that represented Finial. But the first time we went through into the blending trials, the blend we came up with was about 60% Finial Cab and 40% Finial Cab Franc. So it was actually not a Cab Franc. We came back, 3 months later before we did the blending and revisited all the blending trials. And again, that Franc had evolved, the Finial Franc had evolved in barrel so much, and it was so unbelievably cool and expressive. We were like, whoa, stop the train, because we're going to hero this wine and this grape and this block. Same thing here on this Quintessence Franc. When we picked it, it was picked as a blending component largely. For most of its life, we thought great blending component, but not a Cab Franc, and then it kind of turned out really interesting. And then you heard Matt refer to the Resurgent Vineyard Cab Franc. We pulled that for the first time in 2018. We picked some, it was third leaf block. We got 800 pounds of fruit off of an acre and a half, enough to make 1 barrel of wine in 2018. And it was really, throughout its life, it's been a really interesting beast, totally unlike the other 2 Cab Francs we had in bottle. Showing a little bit more of that greenness, and kind of had me worried, is it going to be too funky? Well, it just got to a point where okay, well, let's see. And we only had 1 barrel of it, so it's 22 cases. We put that into bottle in our winter bottling in February on Valentine's Day. And about a week ago, Matt texted me. We're at home one night, and he's at his home, I'm at my home. And he texts me and says, holy bleep, I just opened the Resurgent Franc, and this is pretty killer. It tastes like it could have come out of the Loire Valley. So I'm like, okay, I'll be right back. And I went out to my garage and grabbed a bottle and brought it in, opened it, and it was just like, whoa. So we have yet another Franc in the lineup, and could be really, really cool to see if we're becoming some sort of Cab Franc geeks that end up making a bunch of interesting Cab Francs. So yeah, Cab Franc is a beautiful, beautiful varietal. I think it's still slightly underappreciated, and a lot of times when it's done in the New World, it's not done the way I would prefer. I won't say it's not done right, but it's done the way that I don't prefer it done. But we've managed to hit a couple exemplars now that I think are all unique and different, and I'm really excited about.
Yeah, and I see that there was just another question that came through from Maddie. She was asking about what our oak program is on the Viognier. And so for us on our Viognier, we're 100% neutral oak. So for us, it's just a neutral vessel to hold the oak, to hold the wine during fermentation. And then we leave it in the barrel for about 5 months leading up to bottling. And so for us at that point, we're not looking for any outward oak expression in our Viogniers. If we were, we would use some second fill barrel or a new oak barrel. But we use neutral, which means that it's it's otherwise neutral when it comes to the flavor profile that it will offer to the wine. And for us, we use it more for textural purposes. That neutral oak barrel along with that daily stirring of the lees and the yeast during fermentation, builds noticeable texture and mouthfeel to the wine. If you were to ferment in stainless steel or a concrete egg, for those of you that have had wines that are out of concrete, those present drastically different profiles than what we've generated on neutral oak for this Viognier. Stainless steel is going to show otherwise more steely and minerally and really even more laser focused and driven on that acid profile, right down the center of the palate, where the texture and mouthfeel that we develop in the neutral oak barrel is more coating and expansive on the palate, and that's why we do that. That's a stylistic choice for us. Because we don't take the wine through any other steps to develop that mouthfeel, we do it by using those neutral barrels and the daily stirring. If you were to run it out of a concrete egg, I don't know exactly because I've not done a lot of those ferments in a concrete egg or seen the results. Jay definitely has, but I know for sure a concrete egg, you attribute even more minerality to it because you're fermenting it inside of a vessel full of minerals. And I think it's still even more kind of driven like a stainless steel barrel, but just more minerally, with more mineral components as opposed to what we're getting out of oak. Jay might have more to add about that egg ferment.
Yeah, I was fortunate during my time at Tranche to work with a big Rhone White program, and on each of the lots we usually had, we almost always had some stainless barrels, a lot of neutral barrels, and some new barrels on Viognier, Roussanne, Marsanne, Grenache Blanc, Claret Blanc, Picpoul, and some of those also got some concrete egg ferments. So you were really able to see all those components. Matt, I've talked on multiple occasions that when our white program grows, and we're able to have bigger lots where it's a little bit less of a risk, or we'd like to play with a little bit more, maybe a little new oak barrel, one new oak barrel here on a Viognier, or when we pick up some Grenache Blanc here in a couple of years, when it comes online, just to see the results we get. I mean, we really love the style we're driving with our Viognier right now. I just love the kind of that lighter and more acid-driven style. So I don't know that we're missing anything, but it's always worth checking it out. I mean, we've seen some great results from barrels in my time at Tranche, and I was always pleasantly surprised by some of the Rhone White ferments that we did over there and how some of those components turned out. Yeah, to your question about stirring, Matt mentioned we do daily stirring, often twice a day when we could get over to stir them twice a day during ferment, morning and evening, and then also periodic stirring every week or 2 weeks during aging as well. Just to keep resuspend the lees, build that creaminess. And we do that, frankly, we leave almost all of our wines on heavy lees as long as we can. We generally don't rack off the lees after malolactic. We'll reactively rack if something's getting a little reductive, if we're seeing some stinkiness out of a barrel and we need to get it off of some smelly lees, then we will rack off lees and go clean back to barrel. But for the most part, we really love what we get out of aging on the gross lees. Gross, it's such a horrible term, but yeah, it's the term of art.
They're not gross, it's just the term gross lees.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, I think that answers the questions that have been in the queue, but if anybody has any more, feel free to pop them back up. And we'd love to hear from you, see if you enjoyed the tasting, if you have anything you'd like to request from us in the future. We were talking about what we might do again upcoming. It looks like I am highly doubtful we're going to see a normal spring release weekend. So we might try to do a virtual spring release weekend with you guys. Anybody else who wants to join? Maybe we'll pop open some of the older wines that we made and revisit those. A lot more of you will have those in hand. We talked about maybe doing a sneak preview of some stuff that's yet to come. Maybe the Reserve Cab, I don't know. People are nice. People ask nicely. If people go online and buy some of these spring wines, maybe we can justify opening a Reserve Cab. But otherwise, again, it's so devastating for everyone in this wine industry to not have spring proceeding as normal. I always tell people ask, well, what's been most surprising in your career change, or what's been most interesting about the wine industry since you've gotten involved. And the thing that I never anticipated was how much, as someone who's generally considered himself an introvert most of his life, the social and communal aspect of wine and winemaking and pouring wine in the winery has been the single most surprising and enjoyable thing for me. I mean, it is so clear to me that lots of you have heard me say this before if you've been in the tasting room, but a great bottle of wine is amazing. A great bottle of wine shared with other people is so much better. And so not having you guys here in the tasting room with us, to have that hustle and bustle, to have people here and just the smiles on their faces and the excitement to taste these wines with us, really, really bums us out. But we hope you all stay really, really safe and really, really healthy. This sucks for everybody, but we all know we're doing the right thing, trying to nip this in the bud as much as possible and prevent it from being a lot worse. So nobody wants to hear another session about coronavirus stuff, so I won't go on about that. But yeah, it sucks. But thank you all for logging in and joining us, and hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Here's to seeing you guys in the tasting room, hopefully sooner rather than later. We look forward to seeing everybody soon, and please be in touch if you have any questions or need anything. We've got nothing but time right now, so fire away.
That's true. All right. Cheers. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Watch for another announcement one of these days. I think we'll do this again because I had a lot of fun. So hopefully you did too.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. No, we're not off yet. Don't say anything bad.
Look at the comments that